Hello, and welcome to Health and Fitness Redefined. I'm your host, Anthony Amen. Join me today as we take a dive into the world of health and fitness, where we learn how to overcome adversity, expect fact versus fiction, and see health and fitness in a whole new light. Boy, guys, we have a jam-packed episode. I am really excited to do this. So we're going to ask all those questions you didn't want to know the answer to. Secretly, you did, which is why you're listening to this episode. But before we introduce our guests, don't forget, go check out that Patreon account that we started. It is chock full of information for all of my gym owners, personal trainers, Group X instructors. You guys want to take your business to the next level. You want to get exclusive access to me. Go check it out. Links over in the show notes. But without further ado, before we bring on each individual person, I just want to talk a little bit about what this topic is and what exactly we're going to be talking about. I'm sure all of you have heard of Atkins. I'm sure all of you, like myself, here in the gym world, have heard of Quest Nutrition. That's right. We have Simply Good Foods coming on, and we have two nutritionist guys from this company, and I think they're both a lot smarter than me, but we'll see. Without further ado, let's bring to the show Jon and Colette. Jon and Colette, welcome. It is an absolute pleasure to have you on today.
Thank you. It's great to be here.
Like I said, I feel like I'm in really good company right now. I feel like we just hang out all day and just talk about this. So I'm really excited to talk about nutrition, and but more specifically, what our episode's going to be on diabetes, which for those that may or may know is now one of these biggest up and coming diseases. It's affecting millions of people and is doing a lot more damage to our society than I think personally anyone talks about in the news or any kind of government office. So I'm really grateful that you guys are willing to bring this subject up front, to talk about it, to talk about it and combat it. So first, Jon, we're going to start with you. Just give us a little background of yourself.
Sure. Hi. Yeah. So I'm Jon. I'm a PhD in human nutrition. My story with nutrition began when I was an overweight college student who lived with a bunch of football players and ate and drank like they did, but did not work out like them, and had to find my way back into fitness, back into health. And I used a low carb diet to do that. And it's made me very passionate about low carbohydrate nutrition. I pursued my PhD in human nutrition after that, and just love the research showing how reducing the amount of carbs in people's diets can help their health in so many different ways.
Yeah, absolutely love that. Love the analogy. Thank you for that. Colette, what about you? Tell us a little about yourself. What's your background?
Jon was being a little shy there. He's an elite athlete. He's told me stories about him running 100 miles in trails and on his bike. Yeah, so he could bring it. I'm VP of Nutrition and Education at Simply Good Foods, that represents Atkins and Quest. I'm a New York Times bestselling author about eating right, not less. It's all about making the right choices in food. But the bottom line for everybody, I believe, as a nutritionist, I have a master's degree in science, in clinical nutrition specifically. I think for everybody, it's about controlling blood sugar and avoiding those spikes and dips in blood sugar. And the way you do that is to choose high fiber carbohydrates and low sugar options with a low glycemic impact. And that's really important for everybody from the time you're growing up until the time you get old.
You said my favorite word, fiber.
Yeah.
By far my favorite. I went on a rant. I did a solo episode all about the benefits of fiber, how important it is in our diets, and why we're not talking about it enough. So I recommend, guys, if you want to go check out a doozy where I just go off, go check out that fiber episode. But let's get a little more specific here, right? Because to bring the topic to front, we're talking about diabetes. And first, I know there's two different types, but Jon, I just want you to explain a little more specifically what's the difference between type 1 and type 2 diabetes.
Yeah, so type 2 diabetes is the most common. About 90 to 95% of cases of diabetes are type 2 diabetes, with type 1 diabetes being that other 5 or 10%. Overall, there's some 30 million Americans who are thought to have type 2 diabetes in the United States. And with both type 1 and type 2 diabetes, it's a carbohydrate metabolism disease where you're no longer able to properly store away carbohydrates in liver, adipose, muscle, leading to high levels of circulating blood sugar. Now, how that comes about differs a little bit between type 1 and type 2 diabetes. Type 1 is generally caused by the autoimmune destruction of pancreatic cells that produce insulin, whereas people who have type 2 diabetes is more related to the fact that their cells no longer respond to insulin, or they're not able to produce enough insulin to help their cells absorb the extra carbohydrates or glucose that's floating around in their bloodstream. One of the more interesting things is there's been a kind of discussion around this type 1.5 diabetes, which also has become kind of prominent. And some people suggest that up to about 20% of cases of type 2 diabetes actually might be this type 1.5, which has characteristics of both type 2 and type 1, where the pancreas seems to be slightly damaged. Beta cells, which produce insulin, aren't really working properly, but there's also a large degree of insulin resistance going on in the muscle and in the liver.
Very interesting. I was actually going to bring that up later because it's something I had personal experience with a client of mine, but not something I've heard in the clinical setting of it, where you have people that kind of fit both molds. And on the flip side, and maybe you could bring a little more light to this, have you seen people from type 2 flip to type 1?
So they may not traditionally flip because they still have that degree of insulin resistance, but they also don't seem to produce very much insulin anymore. So a lot of people would say it's presenting a lot like type 1, but because of the insulin resistance that they have, which is done by a HOMA-IR test, you would still consider them a type 2 diabetic.
Awesome. Thank you for that. Colette, I'm going to move this over to you. Talk a little bit more about the clinical side of it and just kind of common misconceptions people have about what a patient with diabetes, specifically type 2, tends to look like. And what I mean by that is I hear all the time in my facility, I'm not overweight. Why would I even bother checking my blood sugar? So talk us through like a typical patient coming in, what factors you guys would consider checking them for diabetes, checking the blood sugar, and if you've seen those that maybe are skinny that still end up having type 2 diabetes.
Yeah. So when I first started seeing patients, I could pick somebody out of a crowd walking down the street who had pre-diabetes or who was insulin resistant, because they tend to carry most of their weight around the middle. They're shaped like an apple for those that are slightly overweight or extremely overweight. Most of their weight is around the middle, and that's because of the insulin resistance. For somebody that's normal weight, they're burning off that sugar, so they're not storing it as fat, but it's a constant insult of high blood sugar, the body producing a lot of insulin, so that means they still have enough insulin to take that blood sugar out of the bloodstream and store it as energy. But what they're doing is they're burning it off, so they're not storing a lot of it as fat. And the people that are overweight are the ones that have high triglycerides, because that's how you store excess carbohydrates, in the form of triglycerides. That suppresses HDL, which is the good cholesterol. So they have high triglycerides, low HDL, which puts them at greater risk for stroke. And that's why you'll find out some runners may have a heart attack in the middle of their run. They're normal weight, but they had excess carbohydrates in the form of high triglycerides, low HDL, and that's metabolic syndrome. That's what the physicians call metabolic syndrome. Their total cholesterol is sometimes out of whack, but most of it is predominantly in the form of triglycerides. When a patient comes in, they're hungry all the time. It's the first thing that I hear from patients is like, I can't get my appetite under control. But those are the patients that came in that tried to cut back on fat. They followed the low fat recommendation of high carbohydrates and eat less and exercise more, which don't work for people that are carbohydrate intolerant because they're constantly having that blood sugar spike, producing too much insulin, dropping their blood sugar too low, and then the craving comes in and the hunger comes in, and they have no control over their appetite. So in private practice, what we do is cut back on carbohydrates, especially the refined high sugar carbohydrates. Have them choose high fiber carbohydrates because once you have fiber in the carbohydrate, it slows down the release of the carbohydrate, and then it doesn't cause that spike in blood sugar. Couple that with protein and healthy fats, which slows down the release of the sugar even more. So high fiber carbohydrates in the form of fruits and vegetables, especially colorful vegetables, very important. Couple that with protein, whether it's a vegetarian source or animal source, doesn't matter. Couple that with healthy fats, and then you can begin to control the blood sugar and start to lose weight around the middle if you have excess weight. And if you don't, you can control the mechanism of insulin production, blood sugar production, and start to steady it out.
Awesome. Appreciate that. That was very in detail. Jon, I'm going to move over to you and ask you a tough question. Tough question number one.
Bring it on.
So we look to be about the same age. So I'm going to go back about 20, wow, it's longer than that, over a little over 20 years ago, where they recommended, it was constantly put out low fat, low fat, low fat. I'm sure you remember those times, like all of us are just nodding our heads. Yes. And all the research pointed to that, hey, you need to eat less fat. You should have more carbs in your diet. This is what's going to keep you healthier. This is what's going to help with the obesity epidemic in America. And all the research points this way. Now we're going to fast forward to today, where that logic is exactly backwards. We took the blame from the fats and we turned it into the carbs and vice versa. So how can we necessarily trust the information coming down, or how can we look at it to say, okay, maybe this time we got it right, or maybe we're just completely head over heels and totally wrong about the whole thing when it comes to controlling our blood sugar?
Yeah, I mean, this is a nuanced conversation because when you are looking at research and trying to understand how did this research misdirect us or lead us in the wrong way, a lot of it, when you think about it, when you actually evaluate what studies those recommendations were based on, came from observational type studies, epidemiological data, not randomized controlled trials. And randomized controlled trials, those are our gold standard. A lot of the epidemiological data suggested that reducing the amount of fat in the diet may help limit obesity, but it was really weak associations. And in general, with nutrition research, you don't get really strong associations from epidemiological data. Like, nutrition should be done with randomized controlled trials. It really shouldn't be based off of this type of epi research. And that's because people lie on their food frequency questionnaires. If you ask somebody, how healthy was your diet yesterday, they choose whatever they hear a healthy diet looks like. And so you get all sorts of bias and confounding in that type of research. Now, what's kind of crazy to think about is when Dr. Atkins and the Atkins diet was really popular back in the 90s and 2000s, a lot of people wanted to disprove it. So they started these randomized controlled trials to show that low-fat diets were better than low-carb diets, and actually found the exact opposite. So now we actually have a large body of research that shows that low carbohydrate diets are as effective, if not more effective, for weight loss and other metabolic health related conditions, including type 2 diabetes and especially type 2 diabetes, for these types of outcomes. And so what I would say is that a lot of that past research, if you really look at the strength of the evidence, wasn't very strong, and public health recommendations that were based on that should not have been made. And there were people who objected to it, very smart scientists along the way, who said, hey, we're putting the cart ahead of the horse here. We really need to do these randomized control trials. And I don't want to sound like a conspiracy theorist, but there was some people in the government who said, we don't have time for the research. We need to make an impact on public health right now. And so they went with what they had available. And unfortunately, in my opinion, that was not very good advice.
Yeah. And I just want to add to that, Anthony, as a result of that, according to the Journal of the American Medical Association, if you were to combine pre-diabetes and diabetes together, 52% of the population is either pre-diabetic or diabetic, and
That's a
costing the
huge
economy
number.
billions of dollars. And that's all because of this excessive carbohydrate, pushing excessive carbohydrates, grains. And think about it, it's the USDA is the agricultural center of our government. So they're pushing grains, they're pushing potatoes, and because of that, 60% of calories coming in the form of carbohydrates, it's going to break down your blood sugar metabolism mechanism. It's like a car. If you constantly stress it over and over and over and beat it up, it's going to break down someday. And that's why you have so many pre-diabetics or diabetics today.
Yeah, that was a great answer, guys. Thank you for that. Appreciate it. I kind of want to bounce off of that whole and kind of what Jon was talking about with specifically looking at the different types of studies they do in this proof. And I know I mentioned this on the show previously, but just kind of bring it back to light a little bit. What you were saying back in the 1980s, actually the huge study they used to push that sugar was healthy was sponsored by Coca-Cola. So it just kind of gives you an idea of what's going on is when you have outside influence of a company that benefits from a study that no longer makes that study valid because they want to see a certain evidence, a confirmation bias towards it. I want to go into another type of diet, and I feel like, Colette, this question is more specifically for you because you did write a book about it because it was exactly in your title. Don't eat less, basically. And that's kind of what you see with counting calories, where people are all about, 3,500 calories is a pound of fat. So if I want to lose a pound of fat a week, I have to have a 500 calorie deficiency every day, and then I'll drop a pound of fat and be able to do this over X amount of time to lose X amount of weight. So walk me through why that doesn't necessarily work, and then bring that into specifics of how it affects blood sugar and type 2 diabetes.
Yeah, well, unfortunately, it does work. I mean, if people count calories, they will lose weight, but they will lose probably lean body mass because they're not getting enough protein. And they will consume too many carbohydrates because most of the calorie dense macronutrients are protein and fat. So if you're looking to eat fewer calories, you're going to pick carbohydrates. And unfortunately, there's been also during this time span a supersizing because carbohydrates and sugar are cheap. So the food manufacturers, when they took fat added products, they replaced it with sugar, and a supersizing because now they can give you more of it because they don't have to put protein and fat in there. And so it's predominantly carbohydrate. And again, over time, the carbohydrate, especially the low fiber, highly refined, high sugar carbohydrate, is going to break down your blood sugar, and you're going to wind up with prediabetes. And sometimes you don't even know you have prediabetes. Now people are starting to do in private practice, they're starting to do the HbA1c, which is testing the blood sugar in one shot over a 3-month period, an average, what your blood sugar is like. And everybody's trying to get it under 6, but sometimes you'll find you'll have a 7 or an 8 and not understand why it's that high. It's because that's the beginning of your blood sugar starting to crack down. So I was never a proponent of the calories in, calories out, because people are hungry all the time. They wind up overeating. They're not getting enough protein. And especially when you're losing mass, you want to preserve lean body mass. I mean, that you don't want to lose your muscle, please. That's what keeps you healthy, when you have enough muscle and lean body mass around. So cutting back on carbohydrates in order for you to burn fat for fuel, gives you more calories to consume because your protein requires more energy to break down, and so does fat. So you're able to take in more calories, be satisfied with the high fiber carbs, adequate protein, healthy fats, and then not be hungry and not crave things. So, that's simply the way that I think everybody should go. Yeah, one size doesn't fit all, but a consciousness about carbohydrates is really important. The way we made people fat phobic for 20, 30 years, we should start to make them carbohydrate aware. You don't have to do keto. It doesn't have to be that strict. You just have to have a carbohydrate tolerance. In my Eat Right, Not Less, I have 3 different levels of carbohydrate consumption, all of which would produce healthy outcomes and correct any blood sugar abnormalities. At the 100 level, 100 net carbs or 130 total carbs is fine. Or at the 40 level or at the 20 level if you want to go ketogenic. If you want to go that low, you have to have your carbs under 50 total or 40 net. When I say net carbs, I mean total carbs minus fiber. So having a carbohydrate awareness is so important. Coupling that with the protein and healthy fats is the way I think everybody should go. Especially, I think that should be the new standard of the American diet, the gold standard.
A new gold standard. And then,
Yeah.
John, we'll bounce back to you kind of off this same topic, but start really bringing the conversation into light. What's the difference between Atkins and keto? Is there one? And what specifically are you looking at when you're looking at both these diets?
Yeah, no, that's a really good question. And the original Atkins diet, when Dr. Atkins published his first book back in 1972, he described it as a ketogenic diet. And it is ketogenic for its early stages. But you actually start to reintroduce some lower glycemic index carbohydrates, those ones that have less of an impact on your blood sugar as you get closer to your goal weight, because that's a good indication that your body's able to handle a few more carbohydrates. Your metabolism has started to reset. So I like to think of Atkins as a more flexible type of ketogenic approach, and in the long run, more sustainable. We've actually done a review of all the keto studies over the years. And when you look at the ones that report carb intake, just about everybody can do keto for 6 to 8 weeks. And then you see that we have a big increase in carbs, a carb creep. And so instead of letting people just fall off the wagon, why not teach them how to reintroduce carbohydrates in a healthy fashion? Get those quality carbohydrates back in there, the low glycemic index fruits, true whole grains that still have their hull, that sort of stuff, so that you're actually doing it in a sustainable way. Because when you should approach your way of eating, it is not just, oh, I'm going to do this keto diet, or I'm going to do Atkins for 2 or 4 weeks or until I lose my weight. It has to be a whole change in your lifestyle so that you find something that you can do for the rest of your life. Otherwise, you're just going to yo-yo.
Yeah, and you see that with every diet. It doesn't matter what people do. I've heard someone go on a Oreo only diet and they lost 20 pounds and then gained back 80, but not giving you the full story. Basically, cut weight, try this. You hear that on and on and on again. But Colette, we're going to go back, and I know you both kind of mentioned it briefly, but I just really want a brief answer because I know a lot of listeners don't know what it is you guys are talking about, and what I mean by that is the glycemic index. So can you please just explain to our listeners in a short sentence about what is the glycemic index?
Okay, it's simply a way to check the blood sugar post consumption of a food to find out how high it goes and what its rebound is. What if it goes high, does it come down? Does it go back to normal? So the scientific community gave ratings to particular carbohydrates. Either they're high, they're medium, or they're low. And it's simply based on your blood sugar response to a carbohydrate post-consumption.
Love it. And there's a really good chart that Harvard put out, I believe, is the institute.
Harvard. There's also, it's not as complete as what was the university that did the other glycemic rating?
There's a huge database at the University of Sydney.
Sydney.
Yeah. Yes,
all right, I'm going to have to check that one. We'll put that one in the show notes for guys. University of Sydney Glycemic Index. Very, very interesting. So the Harvard ones, I'm excited to check that out.
Yeah.
And we're going to bounce, again, going back to you, John. So we talked about controlling the kind of carbs you're eating. You mentioned something very interesting, which was doing things over a shorter period of time. And you made that pretty clear that you called it carb creeping, which is where you see people eating more and more carbs throughout the diet, because eating a true ketogenic diet, just in my personal eyes, isn't sustainable. I don't see it as practical to really avoid carbs because they're literally in everything, especially when it comes to how we live our lives. But it has to come to a balance of controlling what we eat, but knowing what we eat, hence that sustainability for life. So what would be your end goal with somebody as far as where you want to see someone be for the rest of their life? Is it strictly below 50 net carbs? Is it sitting above 100? Or is it really just kind of what would fit their diet? What's ideal that you want to see someone be for long term?
Yeah, I think everyone has their own personal carb tolerance. And a great way to keep an eye on it is to say, okay, how many carbs am I eating? Am I gaining weight still? If you are staying pretty weight stable, that's probably your carb tolerance. And you should take a look at, other things like, are my blood lipids good? How's my blood sugar? And tweaking things from there. For a lot of people, in our experience, it seems like it's around 100 grams of net carbs, and that's what we recommend with Atkins for kind of that weight stability level.
So we're sitting at that 100 net carbs, correct?
Correct.
Yeah. Which is 130 total, but I wouldn't eat that all in one meal because then you'll get the spike in blood sugar. So we tell people to have 25 grams of net carbs per meal and save 25 for snacks in between meals. So spread those carbs out during the day.
Awesome. And Colette, or more specifically, something I've brought up to both guests I had on for the keto. I'm just going to ask it straight out. There was a huge study done out of the University of London showing that being on the ketogenic diet long term actually shortened your lifespan because your body's not sustainable to be on it over a certain period of time. But then on the flip side of it, you see people with epilepsy, and they've shown more specifically that it actually is helpful to that group, and it's something they should be on long term because they have less seizures. So, I mean, you're looking at all this confounding research saying, okay, this is one part that says it's bad. This is another part showing it's good. And then I myself am looking at it as, all right, why would I want to go on a diet that's going to put me in a keto flu where I'm going to be sick for the next week and basically have carb withdrawals before I go into this ketogenic state? What would be your solution to that? And have you heard about any of those studies in specific?
John, you can get the mortality stuff out of the way first.
Sure. So again, that mortality study was an observational study where they looked at people's diets according to food frequency questionnaires. And what they found was not people on a ketogenic diet having shorter lifespan, but actually people in the lowest quartile or like the lowest quarter of their reported carb consumption having shorter lifespans. What's really important to note is that I believe in that study, they cut the lowest quartile at about 42% of energy from carbohydrates. That's about 200 grams of carbs a day, 250 grams of carbs a day. What they were looking at was the standard American diet. So unsurprisingly, the standard American diet shortens your lifespan. A ketogenic diet would be about 5 to 10% of carbs per day. Colette and I have been talking about 130 grams of total carbs per day. That's about 25% of energy. And most experts believe that should be the threshold for defining low carb diets. But unfortunately, they're not very well defined. People use a lot of different definitions, and it makes that research really confusing to interpret.
Yeah. And in private practice, I want to know how motivated a patient is. Are they reversing a disease process like diabetes and they want to avoid insulin? Then a ketogenic diet is going to buy them longer life because they're not on medication to control blood sugar. They're doing it without medication and they're doing it with diet only. And in that case, they would be at the level of carbohydrate consumption that their body, their tolerance level, whatever that is, whether it's 50 or 80 or 60. And it's a matter of finding what that tolerance is in the individual. Are they controlling seizures? In that case, then yeah, ketogenic, strict, very low diet is good for them, especially if they can control it without medication, then yeah, you're motivated. Let's put you on very low ketogenic diet. So somebody that's just trying to do it because they want to feel good, you have two options. You could either back into the program and find your carbohydrate tolerance, start at 100, 130 grams a day, see how you feel, see if you lose weight, see how your energy is. That's not good enough. If you want to lose weight and it's not happening, cut back 20 grams of carbohydrate and do that every few weeks until you find your level where your energy level is stable, you're not craving foods, you're feeling pretty good, and you're in your weight wellness mode, whatever that is, losing weight or maintaining your weight. Or you have the other option of you might want to purge. Like some people do better. Just tell me 3 things I could eat. You know what I mean? Yeah, okay, that's protein, vegetables, and healthy fats. And they want those tight guardrails because they don't trust themselves to, have a little of this or portion control or counting. I don't want to count carbs. Just tell me what I could eat and lose weight. And so then you start them low and then you gradually increase the carbohydrates to find that carbohydrate tolerance.
Yeah, I love that. And guys, we're going to take a quick break from our sponsors. And on the flip side of this, I really just want to draw the conversation strictly about type 2 diabetes. We're going to ask all those questions that anyone may or may have. We'll be pre-diabetic. We'll be right into it. So we're going to have a lot of fun, engaging questions. So this is something you're not going to want to miss. And we'll be right back. For us, we know what it's like to feel unhealthy, depressed, and downright defeated. We want to show others there is a right way, and through fitness, you can do anything you set your mind to. Fitness can give you that motivation, confidence, energy you need to bridge that mental gap and prevent you from missing important life events. We understand it's about feeling better, living longer, and being good examples for our kids. We understand this because we live it. And for us, that's the redefined difference. All right, guys, welcome back to the show. We had a really fun conversation. We hopped from keto to Atkins about what it does. We dove into some studies. We're going to get really specific now. And we kind of bounced up and down around diabetes, but really just going to hit the ball home. So, Jon, I'm just going to ask you some really specific questions just so we're all on the same page, which is, what should a normal blood sugar be? Is that fasted, unfasted? And what is the difference between blood sugar and A1C?
Yeah, so when we look at blood sugar, I believe the longest or the best measure of long-term blood sugar is hemoglobin A1C. And the American Diabetes Association and most other health organizations define healthy blood sugar, healthy hemoglobin A1C, as below 5.7. And so that's not a fasting measurement. It's actually a measurement of how your blood sugar has been controlled over the last 3 months. When we're talking about fasting blood sugar measurements, typically below 100 milligrams per deciliter would be considered a healthy blood sugar reading.
So we're trying to stick below 100 for fasted and A1C 5.7. So when you get that really long, confusing blood work back after going to the doctor, you're not looking at it going, I have no idea what this is. Which I get all the time when I come to the gym. They think we're doctors and they go, read this for me. So love that answer. Gives a little more insight into it. So Colette, what would be considered pre-diabetics, and I know you talked a little bit about checking your triglycerides. You mentioned briefly about HDL and LDL. For those that get confused, just always remember H stands for happy. That's how I always remember. That's the good one. And L stands for lousy and low. Yeah. But this is what you mentioned. So talk to us a little bit about total cholesterol and how that affects blood sugar. Or are you specifically looking at HDL, LDLs, or VLDLs?
Yeah, so the very low density lipoproteins, which is the VLDLs, are the ones that are more likely to cause plaque on the arteries. Now, there is a more fluffy kind of LDL that's that it's not good if it's too high, but it's not going to cause you to form plaque on your arteries. And what people make a mistake of when they look at their total cholesterol, they don't look at the rest of the profile. You have to look at HDL. How much is your cholesterol made up of good cholesterol, or is it made up of only bad cholesterol, or is it made up of triglycerides? Sometimes when triglycerides plummet and good cholesterol goes up, it may make your cholesterol go up a little bit. And I used to get scared when a patient comes to me and they say, wow, look, I got my cholesterol down to 110. It's like, oh no. When I see that, cholesterol is a precursor to all your hormones. Like, you're not going to get testosterone. You're not going to make progesterone, estrogen. You're not going to make all of those female or male hormones if you don't have enough cholesterol in your system. I like to see cholesterol 180 to 200, HDL above 60, triglycerides under 100. That to me is a really healthy profile. So people need to learn how to look at the profile and not individual numbers.
Yeah, oh my God, I totally agree. And then, Jon, the question of all questions, which I think we're all on the same page with this, but I kind of want to hear from you, because you're the expert on it, is difference between dietary cholesterol and the cholesterol in your body. For example, if I went ahead and had 4 egg yolks, is that going to raise my overall cholesterol in my body?
Yeah, well, this has been studied extensively. And, what's really been found is that in the vast majority of the population, dietary cholesterol does not impact serum cholesterol. There are some people who are hyper responders. They have familial hypercholesterolemia. They need to be really careful with those sorts of things. But that's a small percent of the population. And you'll see that reflected in the current dietary guidelines, where they have progressively over the years walked back any cholesterol recommendations. What it really comes down to, and as Colette got to, is looking at your overall cholesterol profile and your overall lipid profile and saying, okay, are my triglycerides and HDL at the right ratio so that I have good optimal metabolic health? And that's what's much more important than being concerned about a single total cholesterol number. The other thing that's important to point out is that the body needs cholesterol. So if you don't eat it, your liver is going to try to make it itself. So if you just try to cut it out, it's not going to really serve you the purpose you need.
Yeah, plus egg yolks are delicious.
Nature's multivitamin.
Yeah, exactly. I love that answer. All right, Colette, we're going to get... I walk into your office, you're looking at my blood work profile, and you're going, wow, okay, Anthony, we need to have a serious conversation. Your VLDLs are a little high. Your A1C is coming back a little high. What advice are you giving me as I leave your office to kind of help myself? And how can you help keep me accountable?
Yeah, well, that's the tough part. I usually tell my people that I'm as good a nutritionist as you are a patient. Can't do it for them. You can bring them to the water, you can't make them drink it. So usually I want to get some kind of feel about how motivated you are, like I said before. So at that point, I will know if that's your profile that you just described. I know we need to deal with carbohydrates in some way or form. How strict or how fast we go depends on how motivated you are and how willing you are. Either some people are really motivated and they need those tight guardrails. Okay, I'll start from low and then find the optimal level. Or they a little wishy-washy. It's like, well, can I have my birthday cake and can go ahead and give up beer, and I don't want to give up bread. I can't imagine my life without bread. Then we'll talk about, let's count carbs and keep it at a certain level. So it really depends on the patient, and it's precision nutrition. That's the key word. How do you get it to that individual needs, their physical needs, as well as their emotional and readiness and psychological needs as well. And that's what makes a good nutritionist, and the person that knows how to adjust that.
Oh, yeah, couldn't agree more. And then I go to Colette. She gives me this wonderful answer. Then, Jon, I'm going to you, and we're sitting at a bar, and I'm just like, man, I can't have regular Pepsi because I'm diabetic, so I'm going to have Diet Pepsi instead because there's no sugar in it. and then I'm going to go and have this wonderful bar that has 10 grams of sugar alcohol in it. Talk to us a little bit about what the difference is between, I guess, sucralose. What is the difference between that and sugar alcohols, and how can that affect me as a diabetic?
Yeah, so sucralose is what's known as like a high intensity sweetener. It's very sweet. So it's used in tiny, tiny amounts, milligram quantities, which 1,000 milligrams make up a gram. So you can use tiny amounts to replace grams and grams of sugar. Now, a sugar alcohol is structurally a little bit different. That's more like a bulking replacement. So it's functionally going to be very similar to sugar, have the same mouthfeel, the same product kind of attributes. And in general, sugar alcohols have a really limited impact on your blood sugar. And then those high intensity sweeteners, sucralose, stevia, monk fruit, those all have really, if any impact on blood sugar, like nothing. I mean, they're glycemically neutral essentially, and almost no impact on insulin as well. So they're actually great ways to kind of satisfy that sweet tooth that you might have. I know sometimes I just need something sweet and I try to be good about it, but it's a nice, convenient option to have. There's concerns out there that people have about these kinds of things. And to me, I like to try my best, but I also need convenient options so that I don't go and grab that Coca-Cola or go and have a candy bar when I could just have a protein bar that has a little bit of sugar alcohol or some sucralose in it.
Yeah, I think my biggest problem with more specifically sucralose and less the sugar alcohols like monk fruit and stevia would be that it's 10 times, if not more than that. I remember the exact number, sweeter than sugar itself. So I know personally, if I go and have something that has it in it, my craving for sugar goes through the roof. And it makes it nearly impossible to kind of now not go ahead and eat sugary stuff because of that big sugar blast that my brain just got. That's going, hey, where's this sugar? You gave me the taste and I don't see it. So then you're going up craving a lot more. And I see this with a lot of people. And I've noticed just personally that those that do have diet drinks end up having more sugar than those do not, because they get the craving for it so badly that they go and grab other things that are really high in sugar. What would be a combat to, or just suggestion to that? And have you heard of this before?
Yeah, so one of the things I would point out is kind of different if you think about non-caloric beverages that are sweetened with sucralose, right? There's no calories there. So your brain is getting a signal that there's energy coming in, but then your body's not actually getting energy. Versus if we were to say a protein bar that has sucralose where there is energy coming in. So I would always encourage people that if they are going to use those high intensity sweeteners or sugar alcohols, to go with things that are still going to provide calories, energy, satiation, protein, fat, fiber. Those are satiating macronutrients. So even if you have a little bit of sweet taste, you're still increasing all those satiety hormones from the protein, fat, and fiber that'll help curb those cravings. And we actually have study data where we've fed people exclusively Atkins products and measured their cravings over time. And we look at cravings for fast food, sweets, carbohydrates, other types of processed foods, and they go down. So to me, it's really about not just looking at a single food in isolation, but the overall dietary pattern and how that can help you stick with what your goals are.
Great answer. So it's more about having, if you're having something like this, getting something that has calories in it, so you're not getting that huge empty calorie blast and then craving, and that should be able to control the cravings you'd get from sugar alcohol, correct?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Awesome. All right. So Colette, I'm coming back to you. I have type 2 diabetes and I'm really upset, and it's something question I get a lot, so I want to get an answer from you. Is there a cure? Can I get over this? Do I have a chance of no longer being type 2 diabetic? Or is it yes for those that are in the beginning of it before they start insulin? Or is it no for everybody? Where kind of is that answer in the clinical setting that you'd give to a patient like, yeah, we can get you 100% over this, or B, we can just kind of manage it?
Diabetes is a diet-related disease. There's no getting around it. So it's either you're going to be dependent on medication to control your blood sugar, or you're going to be dependent on your diet to control your blood sugar. Now, the American Diabetes Association recently recognized that a lower carbohydrate approach is the best to control glycemia, because now they're finally getting to admit that diet is the best approach to approach it, because now they're finding that long-term use of blood sugar lowering medication, especially insulin, stresses the kidneys. So by the time somebody's 60, 70 years old, they're on, kidney replacement therapy, or their kidneys get blown out and they have to go for, twice a week to get their kidneys flushed out. So it's a diet-related diseases. There's no way around it unless you don't mind taking the risk of taking medication. Because medication, the medications that are out today are pretty effective at controlling blood sugar. I prefer the patients do it with diet. And I hope that you are the type of patient that are willing to do it.
So, well, I guess the short answer, and this is open to either of you, is there a cure once you are a type 2 diabetic? Or like I said, is it just something you have to manage to prevent it from getting out of control and getting worse?
If you catch it early enough, you could reverse it. Absolutely. The studies show that it's reversible if you catch it early enough. If you catch it at the point that the pancreas isn't functioning properly, the beta cells are blown out, and you're closer to type 1 diabetic, then, I don't know that a type 1 diabetes can be reversible. John, what does the research say?
Yeah, so that's actually why they're looking at doing beta cell transplantations for those types of people. So certainly for the longest time, diabetes was considered a non-reversible chronic diet-related disease that would just slowly progress and progress. There has been a lot of recent research showing that, as you mentioned, Colette, that it's reversible and controllable when caught early, and when diet and blood sugar is changed to control blood sugar. But if you are that far gone that your beta cells are no longer functioning, I think the most cutting edge research would be some gene therapy or beta cell transplantation to restore function.
Yeah.
So basically, if I'm catching early enough, I'm not insulin dependent, I'm not like stripping up a bunch of medication, and I really take this seriously, I do have a chance of reversing it completely. But on the flip side, if I wait until I'm taking insulin every day, then I probably don't have a chance, because the damage has already been done, unless I go try some gene therapy, and that may help me, according to new research, to actually get over the disease altogether.
Now, Anthony, I will point out that people with type 1 diabetes, who essentially are kind of like that far progressed type 2 diabetic, if they follow a very low carbohydrate ketogenic diet, they no longer need medication to control it, because their blood sugar is not going up. They're not consuming carbohydrates. So it seems that the longer you've had type 2 diabetes, especially uncontrolled type 2 diabetes, the stricter you have to be in your carbohydrate reduction to really control it. But there's no reason that somebody who's had type 2 diabetes, that maybe their beta cells aren't functioning anymore, if they are strictly following a ketogenic diet, they could have totally normal blood sugar readings and be healthy.
I love that. And where does exercise fall in any of this?
Oh, everything. Exercise is everything. You can't talk about good health. It's part of the equation if you don't talk about some kind of exercise.
And what specifically? Because I know this is something that I could answer, but I kind of want to hear from you guys. What specific kind of exercise am I looking at? Am I just going to run? Am I hitting the weights? Am I doing a combination of the both?
Again, you're not going to like this, but it depends on the patient and their fitness level. If they're not fit at all, you have to start them slow, and you start with walks and light weights, and you gradually increase the weights and increase the endurance, and depends on them. But John, you're the exercise guru here. You can take it from here.
So, number one, you have to activate those big muscle groups, because those are what take up a lot of that extra sugar out of the bloodstream. And that's what exercise does. there's two ways to take up blood sugar out of the bloodstream. One is by insulin. The other is called insulin-independent glucose-mediated uptake, and that is what happens after exercise. Your muscles translocate these glucose transporters. They're like straws on the surface of your cell. They suck sugar up. They help control blood sugar, and it's those big muscle groups, the glutes, the quads, the core, the back, that really you have to activate to start taking up that extra sugar. I mean, 70 to 80% of the sugar in our bloodstream, this postprandial, like after a meal, is absorbed by our muscle groups. So you have to activate those. And people who are insulin resistant, maybe their body's not very good at taking up sugar when insulin is produced, they still can activate that independent pathway. And that's where exercise comes in.
I love it. Hitting those big compound movements, as we like to say in the field, and really focusing more of a weightlifting training where you really can activate those to help build more muscle tissue, so then you do increase your metabolic rate, help control your blood sugar more, because now you have more of an output with the more muscle you have in your body, and it's a positive feedback loop as opposed to the opposite with negative feedback loop of not doing anything. So definitely love that answer. I'm going to get to start wrapping this up, and I really want to talk about this because this is a tough section. I'm going to call this probably the toughest section I've ever talked to, just because it's hard to have this kind of conversation with somebody. And I see it more as I get older. And what I'm looking at basically is I have clients, or not even just clients, people I meet out and about. They see we're at a gym, they kind of shrug it off and they go, I have type 2 diabetes. Who cares? I'm 100 pounds overweight. I'm not hurting anybody but myself. Why should I care? Or I get the people that tell me, that's what medication's for, and it's all a farce, and none of it's true. And you're seeing this more. And I've always wondered kind of in my head, why? Why is it more of a thing that's become more commonly accepted to have it? Like, people laugh about it. And I've been at parties and people are just like, what kind of medicine are you on for your diabetes? And like making light of it and not understanding how serious of a condition it is. Is this something you guys have seen? And if so, how do you approach somebody that feels this way?
Yeah, I blame registered dietitians out there that are saying diets are dead. And that's going on in the media right now. That's going on in health writers. Diets are dead. People can't stick to it. It doesn't matter. When I try to talk to congressmen or the people at the USDA about the food guide pyramid, they say, people don't follow it anyway. It's such a defeatist attitude. And, what I would do is try to tell them the consequences of their choices. Just educate. I think education is power. And once you could educate them on the health outcomes of their choices, rather than just their choices for the sake of just throwing in the towel, and talk to them more about what the long-term consequences are of that, sometimes you could turn somebody's coat. But it's only through education and communication that you could do that. And the media doesn't help when they say diets are dead, they don't work. And that's why Noom is so, popular now, because it deals with the psychological end of things. I'm sorry. I don't care how much you meditate. You're not going to change your blood sugar around if you continue to eat carbohydrates.
John, you have anything to add to this?
All of a sudden.
No, she pretty much nailed that. And I kind of agree with you, Colette. It's the media's and societal's defeatist attitude when it comes to, hey, it's whatever. We saw this with the pandemic, and I'm just going to talk specifically out of the state of New York, how it relates to our conversation, where gyms were the longest shut industry. And that was a huge impact on the rate of type 2 diabetes, especially of such an increase, because they kept shunning gyms. And it was all over the news 24/7. Gyms are super spreaders. Don't go to a gym. Don't do this. Don't do this. Stay inside. It was, what you saw was they kind of just pushed gyms to the side. They pushed fitness to the side. And they kept saying, don't go there. Don't do this. Is that something we still see post-pandemic? And how has this affected both, I guess, your guys' jobs, because we're all in the same industry, and how is this really going to affect our society in the long run?
Oh, yeah. The people gained 30 pounds over the pandemic on average. That's according to all of the latest surveys. 30 pounds. And I was hoping when the offices started opening and they had to put pants on, that they would get more motivated and try to lose weight. That's yet to be seen, because I don't think as many offices have completely opened as we were hoping. But it's going to take a while for people to come around. They're still afraid. I was afraid too in the beginning. Here's a virus that could kill you because it's a new virus. We don't know a lot about it. The immune system doesn't have the antibodies to it. But now that we're in the endemic stage of it, 70% of the population may have the antibodies. So I think people will start relaxing when they get it and they find that they're not going to die and they just have a cold or a cough. I think things will start to come around to normal.
I think my biggest issue with all of it was the number one killer still is cardiovascular disease.
Yeah.
By far. But yet the reaction to the pandemic was way more precautionary, and people said, we have to do this, we have to follow this, we have to save lives. But yet the number one killer we just blatantly ignored. And it's lowered our lifespan for the first time in human history. We're going down instead of going up. We're not living longer, we're living less. And it has a lot to do with how we're pushing things, and we're just kind of not taking it as seriously as it is. And something you both mentioned in the beginning of the show, just to kind of get final thoughts of this. Yes, I specifically type 2 diabetes. It kills you. You end up dying a slow, painful death. People don't realize that. It's not quick. You end up going blind. You lose limbs. It's horrible what it does to the human body. And then you also, if you say, okay, I'm not impacting others, well, that's not true, because your life is dependent on other people's lives. And then on top of that, your economic costs that you're putting on A, yourself, and B, the society in general. It costs us billions of dollars. I'm going to repeat that, billions of dollars a year for preventable diseases alone. Think about how much more money we'd have in our society and how much cheaper everything would be if we took care of our own health and really took it seriously. Maybe 50% of the people that have type 2 diabetes ended up not getting it. Now we just stop straining our healthcare system. So now our insurance rates will go down and make it way more affordable for everybody, which is what we all want anyway. And this is an all-encompassing purpose where people just don't realize that it's more than just about them. It's about everybody. And it's really time to take this conversation more seriously. And I really just want to make that driving point home. And I want you guys to add to this, and then we'll wrap up the show.
Go ahead, John.
Yeah, Anthony, I would say I saw a statistic recently showing that 1 in 4 healthcare dollars in the United States is spent on diabetes care.
Wow.
So think about all of the chronic diseases we have, cancer, cardiovascular disease, everything. 1 in 4 dollars is spent on diabetes care. So this is, as you said, something that's manageable, preventable through diet, and it doesn't have to be huge changes. The research is pretty clear that even 5%, 10% weight loss has huge impacts on your diabetes risk or ability to manage diabetes. So I think we always get obsessed with extremes. And my message today would be even moderate changes that benefit you in the long run can really, really improve your health.
Colette, you have anything to add to this?
No, you guys did a great job. I have nothing to add to that. Yeah, and you're so passionate about it, Anthony. It's good that you're in the position you're in to spread that word.
Yeah, it's something that's always really, really got to me. I see it with close family friends that don't understand the impact it's having on them, and I watch them slowly kill themselves, and then I have to explain to them, or I can't even explain to them. I don't even have the conversation where, you're not going to see your kids grow up. Have you thought about that? Have you thought about you're not going to be able to move? Like, you can't get up a set of stairs. And you're 50. How do you expect to make it 60 or 70? and even have a good life beyond that. And even if you did, why would you want to live that long if all you're doing is laying around all day and you can't use your retirement to go explore the world, to be active, to do the things you put off for 40 years because you spent all that time working. Now you can't enjoy your retirement.
Yeah.
So it's just something that we really need to bring light to this conversation. I appreciate you guys do this. But final two questions I ask everyone. Like I said, they're really, really easy. Colette, we'll start with you. The first one is, if you were to summarize this episode in one or two sentences, what would be your take-home message for it?
Yeah, just pay attention. Just look in the mirror and pay attention to how your body's changing, and know that you can control your life and your outcome, and how you look, how you feel, your health, your future. It's in your hands. You can do it. And the way to do that is being conscious of what you're eating and paying attention to those refined carbohydrates and sugars.
I love that. Two simple words. Pay attention. Wow, that's awesome. All right, Jon, you got to top that. Go.
I think along those same lines, we talked a lot about different numbers and hemoglobin A1C and cholesterol readings. And, there's so much good information out there these days on the internet that you shouldn't just rely on your healthcare provider to interpret those results for you. Be empowered when you get your blood work. Go check and see if your hemoglobin A1C looks good yourself. It's so easy to access this stuff these days. And go get your blood work done on a regular basis. Don't be one of those people who hasn't had their hemoglobin A1C checked in 5 years, goes in and finds out they've been diabetic for 5.
Yeah.
Yeah, so true. Absolutely love that. And last question, like I said, it's the easiest one of all. Where can people find you, get a hold of you? Colette, you can go first.
Well, we have a website for Atkins, atkins.com. I have a weekly blog that you could read every week, and a lot of good information is there. You could check out my books. Eat Right, Not Less is the latest one that I think would apply to most of the audience that we have here.
I love it. And Jon?
And if you're interested in learning more about research, we have the Atkins Healthcare Professional Research Portal, atkins-hcp.com, which also has a Facebook and a Twitter, and is always putting out new studies and sharing all the best health information.
And we'll definitely get that on our show notes. And thank you guys for joining us on this week's episode of Health and Fitness Redefined. Don't forget, hit that subscribe button and join us next week as we dive deeper into this ever-changing field. And remember, fitness is a journey, not a destination. Until next time.